So action and rhetoric differ, and it's very important for us to know the difference and be able to detect propaganda. And I want to talk to you today about the difference between the progressivist rhetoric and the progressivist agenda, what the agenda is really for behind all the rhetoric. But before we begin, we have some news. We have a wonderful magazine here that my colleagues at Lotus have created.
Oh yeah,
it's The Islander.
Yeah, Islander. My essay is the first one in there. It's very good.
Definitely give that a read.
So it's titled "If the Situation Was Hopeless," because nothing's over, nothing's done. We're just at a low ebb at the moment.
Sargon at his optimistic best.
I am optimistic.
I'm not as optimistic as you. I think the UK is. I think where PREORDER is right, actually, is there's no political answer to what's going on in the UK, and that actually America will be the last stand for what we call the West.
There's no political answer yet, but things have been worse in the past. They doubtless will be worse in the future. Nothing's over.
We must return to Christ.
Right. I want to share with you
the Alfred the Great position.
I want to share with you my theory about identitarian leftist politics, and then show you how it actually plays out and how people are actually speaking and recreating it. So I wrote this last April. I say identitarian leftist politics separate people into groups with incompatible views of what constitutes peaceful coexistence. Tell them that disagreement with their perceived interests is an existential threat to them. When these incompatibilities become felt, invent a common enemy. And the common enemy is the Western native population of each Western country. And I want to show to you how this plays out. Now, I want to talk to you a bit about Anne Applebaum and 2 tweets she shared yesterday. Now, one thing to say is that if you write a book about the USSR and you criticize the USSR, whatever else you're saying, you have a place in my heart. That doesn't mean I can't criticize you, and it doesn't mean I cannot think you can be horribly mistaken and also in dangerous ways. And she is sharing something that I think is unbelievably misleading. So she says, everyone should read Project Over Zero's report on LGBTQ scapegoating. It's an analysis of how this tactic has been used in authoritarian campaigns around the world. And she's carrying on here. LGBTQ scapegoating is not random. It is not a natural consequence of polarization or an expected backlash to right advancements, but rather a strategy to deepen divisions and erode democracy.
Okay.
Right. So I think that this is horribly misleading. And I have a response underneath, and I tell her, there can be no democracy without dialogue. There can be no dialogue with hate speech laws, especially when they're ultra subjectivist.
Yeah.
And the cancel culture they have generated is being used to silence people from actually expressing their views. And also, there is this lie that is being propagated that the LGBTQ plus community has a uniform view of what constitutes peaceful coexistence. It does not.
Imagine them having a uniform view on anything.
Right.
Yes.
God.
Yes, and that is the issue, because when people give just a few minutes of thought to understand that these are the problems, these are problems, and this isn't a community that has the proper amount of harmony, as that the rhetoric of progressivists suggests, they become cancelled and they become marginalized.
And the whole thing's kind of artificial anyway. It's not a natural constituency.
No.
Exactly.
What do they really, do the lesbians and gays really feel like they're on the same side?
Right. What does the LGB have to do with the T?
Well, yeah, but just what do lesbians and gays actually like each other?
No.
I've met many that didn't seem to like each other. It's anyway.
There's a report here by the Over Zero project that tries to link a decrease in democracy and democratic institutions with the LGBTQ scapegoating, or what they refer to as LGBTQ scapegoating. I want to show you that how literally what is being written here is first and foremost a projection. whatever degree of truth it has for some people, it's even more true for them.
Right.
For the people who have written down this report, the people who are propagating this progressivist rhetoric. Now it says, this report explores the connection between two escalating crises: the systematic targeting of LGBTQ communities and democratic backsliding worldwide. It examines how the rhetorical, political, and physical attacks targeting the LGBTQ community are, in addition to a critical rights issue, a central component of the authoritarian playbook, cloaking themselves as culture wars, politics as usual. We will talk in a minute about the authoritarian playbook because it raises some very interesting questions. It says, LGBTQ scapegoating is not random. It is a strategy to deepen divisions and erode democracy. So basically what they're saying is that...
Oh, good. Sorry, yeah, no. This wasn't launched on wider society as an attempt to deepen divisions. No, of course not.
Yeah, so basically they constantly separate the population in groups of oppressors and oppressed. And then they are projecting by saying that, well, being critical of the LGBTQ progressivist agenda is to deepen divisions. And
it turns you into Mussolini, apparently.
And to talk about divisions that aren't there, where in fact there are. Let's see just a bit here. It says, this report provides a framework for better understanding LGBTQ scapegoating, identifying its political goals, and distinguish it from politics as usual. That's going to be interesting. So it says, the 6 goals of LGBTQ scapegoating are to stigmatize, to mobilize a base, to win elections, to polarize, distract, and normalize political violence.
So weird, because I wouldn't have thought the LGBTQ community was actually an election-winning strategy. But, I mean, in the modern era, I guess it kind of is. A lot of the American Republicans are very much running on that these days. Well, so I guess it is, yeah.
One thing to notice here is the concept of the tyranny of the minority. And a lot of people think that talking about it is a bad thing, but we absolutely should talk about it. And it's not a thing to be shunned, as it is regularly shunned by progressives, but it's just fairly simple. When you have political parties that take the majority of the population's support for granted, that leaves you a small gray zone of swing voters. One of the ways to carve that zone is to appeal to groups. So if, let's say, that gives disproportionate amount of power to the groups that belong to the swing voters, because the parties that try to appeal to them, they take most of their voters for granted.
They're the only ones that are genuinely sort of politically active.
Yes.
Because the other ones are just foregone conclusions.
Yes, and this is also what is interesting to see when people talk about uniparties and parties that, despite their major differences, they have similar agendas, and even if they don't, they end up pushing forward the agendas of groups, of minority groups, because they think that these groups are going to win them elections. Let's see here from this full report. So I'll just show you some stuff here. If we can go to, well, could we go to page 5, please?
Possibly not.
Possibly not. Anyway, I can tell you, it talks about, in page 5, yes, thank you. Now it says, the presentation organizes insights about a growing international crisis, the global scapegoating of LGBTQ people. So they're talking about an international crisis.
I imagine that the level of LGBTQ scapegoating varies from country to country.
Yes. And there it says, here's what we found. LGBTQ scapegoating is strategic, used to achieve political goals. It is not random, not a natural consequence of polarization, but a strategy to drive polarization. Well,
okay, but that's what LGBTQ is itself.
Well, this is the funny thing, isn't it? All of this is, they're outlining their agenda. There's no self-awareness.
This is what we've done, and now they're doing it too. Oh no. How could they do that to you?
It is global, not US specific. It is part of the...
Okay, yeah,
I wonder why.
Yeah.
I wonder why it's not just
Yeah,
specific. It is part of the authoritarian playbook eroding liberal democracy worldwide. Now, I mean, this kind of rhetoric isn't actually democratic if you think about it. Even if you don't like democracy, democracy requires dialogue. You can't have dialogue with hate speech laws,
Right.
where everything is just penalized.
Or because it's out of the authoritarian playbook.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Is there anything more authoritarian than telling people they can't say something?
Right.
No. And it says there, democracies with civil rights and individual liberties are called liberal. Democracies with elections but not civil rights and individual liberties are called illiberal. The question is, for whom and what counts as a civil right?
And also, this just, well, you either have civil rights or you have no civil rights. And it's like, that's not how it works.
Yes. And also it says here, to care about democracies, to care about LGBTQ scapegoating. I would say that to care about democracy and also to care about your country, let's put it this way, is to care about the people of your country, irrespective of what group they fall in. It seems to me that this progressivist agenda is definitely talking about LGBTQ scapegoating, but they're very okay with, they have zero problem. Actually, they're actually driving it with scapegoating the people who don't belong into the LGBTQ agenda, the let's say the natives of each Western country. Apparently, there's no problem with scapegoating them. Everything is just a problem of people from these countries.
It's anti-normative, isn't it?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And this is exactly what they did to the majority population who were just enjoying their lives and getting on with things.
Yeah. It says here, 18 years of declining freedom. Queer scapegoating is occurring amid a broader democracy crisis. In 2024, Freedom House marked the 18th consecutive year of declining global freedom and liberal democracy. And it says LGBTQ people were targeted to varying degrees during several decades. But could there be a causal relation between that? Because the actual promotion of the progressivist agenda is eroding people's liberties. So it's not exactly a wonder why these two things are related. They're not the only reasons that lead to the erosion of liberties, but at least in the Western world, they're the main reasons.
Yeah, but I hate this such abstract framing that really is insufferable. I mean, it presumes to start with that ultimate freedom is an ultimate good, which I don't agree with. So actually, maybe if freedom has gone too far, then a declining amount of freedom might actually be a good thing. For example, if, say, New York or wherever has, you can have abortion up until the point of birth, and someone who isn't a monster says, you know what, guys, actually, I'm not sure murdering babies when they're literally viable and about to be born is quite right. We'll have a discussion about the fetus and these things later. But I think when we get to the point where it's literally about to come out, and the only thing that separates it from being a baby with its own rights and something that the woman can just choose to have killed is literally the passage through the canal.
Yeah, a few pushes.
Then we've got a different thing. So actually taking that away, okay, yes, oh no, freedom's declining. Good. Fewer babies being murdered means freedom declining. That's okay, because that means that ultimate freedom actually wasn't a good thing, and having a sensible, even middle ground was probably better than just allowing people to do whatever the hell they want.
You're right, but in this context, I don't think there are fewer freedoms. I think in the LGBTQ community, there are more freedoms than there's ever been.
Sure, but just in this context, I hate this. Oh, well, there's fewer freedoms. Well, maybe that's a good thing.
It is.
Maybe it's not great to be ultimately free.
Well, I think I agree with Calvin, because they're talking about liberties, but I do think they have in mind what you have in mind. When they talk about ultimate liberty, but it's just for them.
Yeah.
So what is interesting here, we have the authoritarian playbook. I want to ask you.
I've never read this.
I want to invite you to
Finally, we've got a copy.
ask yourself whether the left progressivist circle is actually recreating the authoritarian playbook that they have. So they have 7 key tactics. Okay. Let's go one by one. Number 1, politicizing independent institutions.
Well,
the BBC, Ofcom.
I've been reliably informed by Carol Hannish and all of the other progressives that came after her that the personal is political. There is nothing that is not political. So that it's politicized already. So no one's politicizing independent institutions. They're all politicized.
Okay.
Yeah. And this was the orthodox left-wing thought for the last 70-odd years, right up until this moment, it seems.
Also, let's just mention academia.
Okay.
It is meant to be an independent institution, but it's completely leftist run.
Political.
But a lot of leftists don't like talking about it. And there's a scene that a lot of you may know. The great Roger Scruton had a debate with Terry Eagleton on an Intelligence Squared.
Okay.
And Terry Eagleton was saying that, the right just has conquered universities.
Right.
Roger Scruton told him, literally, I'm the only right-wing person in the university.
Well, I found they usually acknowledge it, but they don't want to face up to the consequences. So before I did any media stuff, I was a teacher, and I used to do teacher training. I used to do diversity training, and I'd get them all in the room and say, we're doing some diversity training, and then I'd talk about 75% of academics being left-leaning and why that might be a problem. And then they'd get cognitive dissonance. They'd hate it. They'd recognize it, but they wouldn't want to do anything about it.
Not this kind of diversity training.
Yeah, we don't want to be more diverse in that way. No.
75%. That's in the before.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
In the before, because now it's
that's
way
at least
more
7 years ago now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So number 2, spreading disinformation. Yeah. Okay. The left has never said anything wrong.
All I'm saying is that Russia was definitely funding Trump.
Yeah.
And let me define woman for you.
Number 3, aggrandizing executive power.
Oh my God.
Just think of it this way. You constantly have the criticism that, in right-wing circles, there is always this appeal to an emergency that justifies the erosion of civil liberties in order to do. Well, how is the climate thing working in this case? In exactly the same sense.
Yeah.
There's an emergency crisis.
Governments have to act.
WHO treaty.
They have to erode people's liberties. So again, they are doing the first 3 things. Now, quashing dissent.
Oh yeah.
I don't know.
Do we even need to explain?
Do we even need to explain?
Has anyone seen any protests?
Any hate crime laws?
Yeah, they're just everywhere. Like the YouTube terms of service. Yep.
Yeah. Hate speech laws all across the board. Now, number 5, scapegoating vulnerable communities.
Shut up, incel.
Number 6, corrupting elections. Number 7, stoking violence.
Right.
Yes.
Anyway, so
don't punch a Nazi or anything.
Yeah. And let's move to page 18, which is the last one. And I want to show you here something that is interesting. They are talking about vulnerable communities. That it is a tactic that is used in order to,
That was interesting though.
Yeah,
you will go. Sorry, I wanted to show this. That I had a cognitive dissonance. Yeah, it says this presentation focuses on one part of this playbook. It says scapegoating vulnerable communities.
Right.
And what I want to say this is that a lot of the progressivist conceptual machinery is trying to portray all these groups, the minority groups, as vulnerable, as if vulnerability is not something that could characterize the general population.
Yeah, in what way are these communities vulnerable?
Yeah.
Yes, and they're talking about the scapegoating them as being a problem, but they systematically blame everything upon everyone else. And I want to show you this clip here.
It's gone off to the...
Yeah, it's gone off. This clip from the Oxford Union debate between Winston Marshall from Mumford & Sons and Nancy Pelosi. I'll show you about a minute from it. I think he was absolutely stellar. We don't have...
Populism is not a threat to democracy. Populism is democracy. Words have a tendency to change meaning. When I was a boy, woman meant someone who didn't have a cock. Populism has become a word used synonymously with racist. We've heard ethno-nationalist. We've bigot. We've hillbilly, redneck. With deplorables. Elites use it to show their contempt for ordinary people. This is a recent change. Not long ago, Barack Obama, while still president, he took umbrage with the notion that Trump be called a populist. How could Trump be called a populist? He doesn't care about working people. If anything, Obama argued he was the populist. Something curious happens if you watch Obama's speeches after that point, more and more recently. He uses the word populist interchangeably with strongman, with authoritarian. The word changes meaning. It becomes a negative, a pejorative, a slur. To me, populism is not a dirty word.
So definitely check this debate because he was absolutely magnificent. And it shows a lot when the people who are claiming to be pro-democracy are systematically quashing dissent when it comes from the people they claim to represent. And I have a good example here that I want to show you and remind you of. To show you this is one of my favorites. Helen McEntee, just before the Irish referendums, she said one day before, on the 7th of March, one day before the referendums, I hope you will take the time to vote on Friday. And I hope you will vote yes and yes. I will be voting that way. And when I do so, I believe I will be voting for a more modern, inclusive Ireland. Our constitution matters. It matters that its language and its contents reflects the Ireland we are. And the Ireland we want to become. And the question here, the obvious question is, when you have these results here, who is we?
It's we. Not us, not the ordinary folk.
Yeah, that's exactly the point, isn't it? So, populism is evil and right-wing, and it's like, okay, but democracy is based on majority share.
Yeah.
That's the point of it. And so the only people on the other side of this must be a minority of elite, usually managerial types, who think that they should be given executive power over everything, regardless of what the majority thinks.
Yeah, they don't want a tyranny of the majority. They want a tyranny of the minority.
Yeah, which is what most tyrannies are.
Right.
So,
right. And now we're going to talk about the constant victimization of that community and the constant demonization of people who don't belong to that community.
Right.
Or the, what's it called? The normative. Yeah. So if you just look at the debates that are being had within members of these communities, you will see that a lot of them have directly opposed views of what constitutes peaceful coexistence. Members of some communities say that in order for me to be respected, I want A, B, and C. And other members of other communities that belong to this circle, they say that in order for me to be respected, I want the exact opposite from A, B, and C. Yeah. So they're absolutely diametrically opposed. And here comes the place where we see two tiers in wokeness. I've said tier one is the wishful thinking tier. It's the Eurovision audience tier. People who just say, okay, why can't we be friends? All of us, let's just hug each other. All of that and all problems are going to go away. And the other is the more Machiavellian and social engineering type that actually, to be honest, they also don't care about the members of these communities.
Well, it's the hippies versus the communists, isn't it, really?
Yes, exactly. Here, Jeremy Corbyn says in the Council of Europe, there is no LGB without the T.
When was this?
That was...
Oh, it's a recent one.
It's a recent one. Now, the question is, why, if people are members of that community, why do they need someone like Jeremy Corbyn to come and tell them that unless you support the entire agenda surrounding that community, you're not a member of that community?
I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking, the LGB have an issue with their sexuality. The T have an issue with their body. What do the two have to do with each other? But your point's more interesting. Which one is Jeremy Corbyn? And if he's neither of them, why has he got anything to say on this? By their own logic.
Well, what people like Jeremy Corbyn will say, I think, is that all of them have to be supporters of the agenda.
Yep.
And to the extent that they are not, they are brainwashed by the evil Westerners.
Cool.
And we have a really good tweet here by Freya India. A culture that rewards victimhood isn't compassionate. It's cruel. Compassion is not rewarding suffering until it slides into self-indulgence.
Yes.
Compassion is not belittling Gen Z until we lose belief in ourselves.
Yes.
That's an interesting thing because a lot of the rhetoric of progressivism is about empowerment. It's about just being yourself and empowering the individual. But there's an interesting question. Whatever you think about the idea of individual empowerment, my point here is different, is that how do you empower people when you're actually making them incredibly fragile, non-resilient, and you foster a mentality of victimhood. This is, to be frank, this is the Machiavellian progressivists actually taking advantage of the tier one wokeists, who are maybe naive or are naive enough and maybe operate more on the level of sentiment. Because if people are members of these societies and they sort of want individual empowerment and be feeling a bit freer and stuff like that, how is habituation into feeling a victim going to help them? And what is interesting is that this goes constantly in almost everything. And I'll show you something that personally I found it a bit funny. It says here from UCLA School of Law Williams Institute, same-sex couples more vulnerable to the negative effects of climate change.
Right.
Again, victimhood all around, even when it comes to climate change. Climate change.
What's their argument?
Affects. Okay.
No, we don't need to go to it. Right
We
now.
go that they live frequently too close to the sea, and apparently the sea turns you gay.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Well, something's doing it.
Yeah. And Billboard Chris is saying, checking in on my gay friends. You haven't overheated. Be careful this summer.
It's ridiculous.
And I want to talk about Biden here. He gave a speech to black men who graduated, and he was literally trying in their graduation day to remind them of how the whole country is systemically racist against them. And there's a really good tweet here by Christian Watson. Instead of a message of empowerment and hope, those who occupy the halls of power, institutional and political, constantly sell Americans hopelessness and nihilism.
But it's not even selling it to Americans. It's selling
design.
it specifically targeting black Americans.
Oh,
yeah.
I covered this on Monday to tell them literally, you are incapable of getting ahead in the same way a white person is because America is systemically stacked against you. You're going to have to work 10 times harder and America will still hate you. So good luck.
He's admitting his racism.
It's not even that. I mean, let's assume that he sincerely believes it. It's just an evil thing to say to young people who have just graduated.
Yeah.
Like, hello, I'm here to demoralize you.
Wasting your time.
Yeah.
You'll never succeed because you're black.
Yeah.
So
it's literally.
I want to end by going back to my tweet and say that the identitarian leftist politics has these stages. You separate people into groups with incompatible views of what constitutes peaceful coexistence. You tell them that disagreement with their perceived interests is an existential threat, and you make them fragile psychologically and not able to take reality at face value and become citizens that countries need. When these incompatibilities become felt, invent a common enemy. So, and I think that this is exactly how the progressivism behind the rhetoric works.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters. And if you want to see more of what we're up to, you can check out Common Sense Crusade, Calvin Robinson series on our website. And if you want to see what we're doing more generally, you can also follow us on Twitter.